Welcome back to the Personal Process Podcast. Today we have Donya. Donya is the founder, creator of Kaiden Biotechnologies. She is an individual who started off in a venture for medical school, and then she went into this field of aerospace. It's going to be an interesting conversation because you don't usually hear going from a doctor to space, but I think there's a couple connections in between, Donya. So is there anything that I missed here? And thank you so much for coming on.
No worries. Thanks for having me. So good to be here. Excited to talk about everything. There's actually a lot of connections between becoming a doctor and going to space. We absolutely need doctors. A good handful of our astronauts started up in the ER rooms as emergency physicians and such. So there are definitely some people that end up going from medical school to becoming astronauts to becoming entrepreneurs. I think everybody just takes a different path, but yeah, there are some connections there. I hope we can talk a little bit more about that and how to get there if you are not in medical school.
Absolutely. And since we already brought this up, what's the kind of medicine you'd be doing in space that's different? Because that's interesting. I've never thought about that.
So space is what we like to call an extreme environment, right? Like the deep sea, like going, even climbing when you're super high in altitude, that's considered extreme environment. So extreme environment emergency medicine is a little bit different, mostly because you are pretty limited. You don't have your crew with you, you don't have a lot of equipment, and you basically, for the most part, don't have a lot of good means of communications to someone who can tell you what to do. So you have to be quite autonomous. You have to be very quick on your feet, and you have to be able to deal with the biggest problems with the least amount of equipment. So that's basically what happens when we have an emergency happening on the International Space Station. Fortunately, the communication is pretty good with the ground. They can talk to the mission control centers on Earth at any time, really. But when we go to the moon and Mars, there is a delay in communications. So that's going to come down to making what we call the chief medical officer very autonomous in order to have them help whoever is injured.
Interesting. So it seems that not only do you have to be an astronaut, know how to get around, know how to fuel the ship, survive in a place where it's not Earth, but you have to also have your own ability to take care of yourself. Donya, I just want to take it back to how this even happened. So you were telling me off air, you were in medical school in Hungary, and then you moved to Canada. What was this move like? How did you feel about it? And how did we get to the first steps of you getting into Kaiden?
Um, so I guess kind of to start with, I was born in Iran. I went to high school and all that in Iran. I even took that entrance exam that everybody complains about. So I went through a little bit of brutality with those years. I was fortunate enough that my parents really pushed me to skip 2 grades. So by the time I was, applying for medical school, I was a lot younger than a lot of people who applied. Going to medical school in Europe is a little bit different than North America, where you just go after, high school. You take exams and such, but you're a lot younger. I was raised in a, very academically oriented family. It's not really unheard of. Traditional Persian family where everybody is really pushing for really the three main careers: either you're a doctor, engineer, or a lawyer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and my siblings, they chose one of those paths, and my parents were also in those industries as well. So it was kind of a given that, you like science, you're going to become a doctor. So and I genuinely enjoyed science. I was the last child, so I spent a lot of time on my own, just reading things and learning things. And there's not a lot of fun things to do over there. But for the most part, yeah, it was just kind of a given. Like, I didn't even really second guess it, if that makes any sense. It was just kind of you're going to be this, and that's it. Just focus on that.
No discussion.
Yeah, and I actually, like, out of nowhere, joined the Astronomy Association in my little small city in the north of Iran. And there were a lot of people who were interested in, like, just astronomy. So we're not even talking like engineering or anything heavy like that, but more towards exploration of the stars and such.
Donya, before I let you go on, how did this just happen? Because this is an interesting niche thing that you decided to join. What triggered your aspiration to join this club?
I had a friend who
Ooh,
she was very mathematically geared, and we often discussed on like different things that we're interested in. We were actually learning English together. I actually think she's in the U.S. now. She
right
also
on.
immigrated. Yeah, so we went to English classes together, and then she told me about this association that she was a part of, and I just decided to go, and it that from that came me like teaching little kids about astronomy through little stories and like plays and such. And at this point I was like 13, 14 myself, so I wasn't really a super adult.
Yeah, yeah.
But um so like I kind of it grew in me. Like it was a passion that was there, but it grew in me. But there was also a lot of discrimination back at
How so?
home. um so when you apply through the entrance exam, there is a gender discrimination. So I think, I don't know how it is now, to be honest. It's been so long, but back then it was like a 40-60. If you're a male, you have 60% chance of getting in. And women were
Interesting.
generally very discouraged from doing STEM, especially when it came to things like aerospace, because it's heavily geared towards weaponry and things like, you're not really doing space exploration, it's more defense. So
Right.
because of that, there was not much incentive to really go into that field. It was a lot of reading books on your own, watching documentaries whenever you could get your hands on documentaries. Really, yeah, I remember loading YouTube with like VPN and all sorts of like crappy internet, which was a whole story. But yeah, it was just a thing that it's a far fetched dream, you know,
Hmm.
maybe one day, but not now. And then to me, it was just a thing. Okay, I'll take it. I'll go to medical school. It's something I'm good at, right? Like it was always to
Right.
me that I'll be good at it. I'll be a good doctor. And then I went to medical school, and quite frankly, within my first semester, I kind of knew I wasn't really built for it. Not because of the academia.
How did you know you weren't built for it?
So we had this course called the communication skills, and it teaches you how to communicate effectively as a doctor. And this is going to sound like really bad on me, but I realized that the like I got very emotionally attached to people that I was caring for.
Right.
And as a doctor, you're supposed to be able to detach yourself a little bit so you're not hurting yourself mentally. Uh, that was kind of the point where I was like, probably not for me. Like I enjoy all the science and it's great. And I shared it with a few people, and they said, "Oh, well, just go to surgery." That's something you don't understand, that you still have to like be able to keep a good mental health, right?
Absolutely.
You have to be able to be quick on your feet, be compassionate, but also know how to detach yourself. So um, yeah, that was
That
again, that
was
was just kind
that
of
was
a
a no-go
thing.
point.
Yeah, but I still stuck with it for couple ish years until my family immigrated to Canada. And yeah, I remember just getting a call from my parents, and they basically were like, "So you have a chance to, you know, have a new nationality that will open a lot of doors for you." I think I was 19 at that point, and then
Mhm.
I immigrated, quit medical school, immigrated to Canada, started SFU.
How
Uh,
did that feel? Because the medical school is like a pinnacle for a lot of people that want to do this, and you're just like, okay, bye. Pretty much 1 year to go. You're like, bye, guys. And then you come back to undergrad, which for those who don't know, I'm not sure if it's the same in Hungary, but in Iran and most European countries, you can usually start in medical school right after high school. In North America, you have to go through an undergraduate degree normally and then apply for medical school. So it's kind of like you're taking one step back after having that nice sip of what life could be as a future doctor. So how did that feel like?
um, humbling.
Mm,
Um, Honestly, I had a really hard time adjusting. If I just say right now, oh, it was so easy to adjust, that's just a lie. That's not true. Immigrating, basically losing your support system, your friends, and also constantly seeing the people that you were in the same cohort with becoming a doctor by the age that you were supposed to become a doctor. Mind you,
mm,
if I actually stuck with my path, I would have been an MD by the age of 22. So that was something that I had to give up, right?
hmm
And I went in with the least amount of delay, but then immigration set me up for a huge delay, which blessing in disguise actually. But at the same time, bachelor's was, it was just a concept of trying to figure out like why I'm still doing calculus. Like I already did all of these. It's like I already did all of these in high school in Iran. You know, the information that we learn in high schools in Iran, it goes all the way to like third year of university here.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes into your brain for no reason. um, so so part of it was that it was actually not that difficult, but another part of it was still a language barrier.
Right.
I even in Hungary, I remember going to different classes from one lecture to another, and I had this little mini dictionary with me, and I highlighted different things as the professor spoke. Because my English was fairly good, but it wasn't that good, you know, like catching everything.
Yeah.
And then when I came to Canada, it just hit me in the face. I was like, oh, well, I'm not this good at all.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So I had to work on that. I had to really, really work on that. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it wasn't as difficult. It was just something to me that, okay, I'm in this to go to medical school. I'll be a typical pre-med. And then by the third year, I was like, I am not a typical pre-med. I'll never be a typical pre-med. I just can't do this.
Right.
um, yeah.
So what was that point that you just said, okay, nope. And then how did you revisit aerospace again from your small little step from your friend trying to learn English in that one little spot in Iran to here
Um,
again?
yeah. So it was actually by complete chance. Well, if you're aware, SFU doesn't really offer a formal aerospace engineering program, though we have a good chunk of people who are interested in it. I was, you know, tabling at clubs days for one of the organizations that I had started, which was health related. And then the table next to me was the SFU Satellite Design Club.
Huh.
Um, I happened to be very short and I couldn't bring down my own banner. So I had to ask one of their members to bring down my banner. And once they did it, they asked me if I wanted to join their club. I was like, what is your club about? And they're like, oh, we make satellites. I was like, just like that. You just make satellites. Like, that's what you do. And they're like, yeah, no, we really make satellites. So SFU Sat makes a category of satellites, which is called CubeSats. It's literally what it sounds like. It's just small cubes and you stack them on top of each other and you call each cube a U, like a
Huh.
unit. Yeah, they made CubeSats. And I told them that I basically had absolutely no technical skills. Like I don't code, I don't do CAD, I don't do any of those things. But I said, hey, I have a lot of experience with starting clubs, administration, getting you guys funding and things like that. Maybe I can help with that. So I just put my name down thinking that I will never respond to an email coming from this club. You know, you put your name down on different things in
Yeah.
like clubs days, right? Um, really lucky for me, they were persistent. They actually emailed me and they said, if you're still interested in like helping us with admin things, you know, we're happy to welcome you.
Wow.
Yeah, so I ended up going to their first meeting. I felt so out of place. I was just, you know, everyone was talking about different technical things, and I I was not. I didn't know what was going on. I was like, what are you guys talking about? What is 3D printing? How does it even work? So yeah, I again, I'm good at math and physics, but theory, like I'm not good, or I wasn't
The
good at
application.
none of it.
Huh.
So I started doing what was called being an educational outreach lead.
What does that
Um,
entail?
it basically entails holding different events for the community and kids mostly to teach them through different projects and arts and crafts, really, about space and satellites. So
Hmm.
basically, I was holding events for the general population and the kids and teach them about all these different things, but I was learning at the same time. The same language my peers used to teach kids, I was listening it and on it. I was, you know, I was like, okay, well, that's how a 3D printer works, you know, that's
Hmm.
how these things work. And you know, I was asking people like, can you explain me, like really dumb it down, but explain it to me like how a satellite works or how are you doing this subsystem and all that. So um, yeah, I kind of like just try to like do some like self like teaching, YouTube videos, things like that, reading different documents from different universities who had already done this, and people were really helping me. So at some point, I was like, this is like, this is basically a non-technical person learning from technical people with things that are not formally taught. So a year after that, or I guess like 8 months by the time I actually formally started. So in January 2019, I was like, guys, let's just start an organization where we actually bridge these gaps, teach people who don't have non-technical, who are non-technical, these technical skills. So from that, we started SFE Aerospace, which is basically Canada's second aerospace team. And we started with about 150 students to teach everyone from all backgrounds these skills, regardless of what they know and what they don't know. Because the belief was that, hey, if I could be useful in this field, so can a lot of people. So let's at least give this opportunity to them. So from that, a lot of doors opened. We got a lot of recognition for the work we're doing. A lot of students joined us from different backgrounds. Obviously, still a lot of engineers, but more people actually, were able to take a shot at this and be like, okay, well, I'm not going to fall behind just because I don't know what this and that is. Yeah, and then the first, I guess that was still when I was doing my last year of bachelor's. So it was just like a crazy busy year. I was trying to do my honors project. That's also where things got a little weird because my honors is in biochemistry and infectious diseases.
A little different from the
Very
micro to the
much.
super macro.
Yeah, I am, and my degree is in epidemiology. So none of it was really related to anything. So this space stuff that I was doing was very much viewed as a side thing, but it was growing so fast that it was becoming the thing that I was putting most of my focus on. And basically, I decided to, once we were just sitting together with the team and we were talking about what would we propose as a payload of a satellite. So a payload of a satellite is basically the purpose of a satellite, what it would be studying and what it would be kind of carrying with it. A lot of people just put rocks and sand in satellites because they just have to fill the space. And out of nowhere, me wanting to basically offer something in this conversation was like, guys, why don't we just study HIV? And everybody just like looks at me like, what are you talking about? It's like, we design a structure where we put non-infectious HIV cell lines in this satellite. And once it goes to space, we study the effect of radiation on it. Because why not? We can get that information. So that was the main door. Like if there was like a gate to this whole thing, like that was the gateway thing. I took it out with my honor supervisor and I told him, this is what I want to do for my honors. Nothing else. This is what I want to do. So he was basically telling me that he was super supportive, but he was like, I have no experience with this. You have to figure all of this out yourself. And I was like, no problem. We got this. So we started doing that. Yeah, we started doing that. We designed that payload, published a paper on it, and presented it in Washington. A ton of people contacted us about it. A lot of people got exposed to our work. And that's that. I mean, the satellite didn't fly.
Oh no!
Like, fair warning, we had to scrap that mission for a better one. I'll get to that. But yeah, that's also how I got started with my master's studies. I connected kind of through those stuff with my supervisor, who does space physiology at SFU. That's all he does. Yeah, just started doing like a graduate degree in something that I was, passionate about, and something that it finally felt right, if that makes sense.
What do you mean by it felt right?
It wasn't a drag anymore. It wasn't that I'm getting out of bed to go do this and then I have to do this. And like, I didn't have to, sometimes you have to keep yourself accountable. Like I was a very big fan of, if I write everything down and do a check mark, it's going to like feel like I'm doing the right thing. And what people call these days being that girl or that boy, right?
Yeah.
When you find what you love, you just become that girl or that boy. You get up every day and you're like, God, I just love what I do. And I just actually look forward to it. And I really want to get this done. And don't get me wrong, it's going to feel terrible sometimes because there's a lot to do. But in the main scope of things, you don't think that, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, or oh, I'm just doing it because I just want this to be the period between this and that. Or it's not just what I'm doing to spend time. It's something that I'm actually like looking forward to.
Right.
So it all started kind of falling into place. And it creates momentum, right? The more you get told that what you're doing is it makes sense, and what you're doing is, you look like you're doing the right thing. Oh, you look so happy. And after such a long time, I was like, oh, you don't look as burnt out anymore, like all that. Which was a real issue for me.
The
being a
burnout.
being a typical pre-med student, you try to take a bite out of everything,
Oh
and
yeah.
try different things and be like, which one looks best? Like which one is the best thing to do? Which is the best cookie cutter?
Oh
The
yeah.
answer is that they're all cookie cutters.
Yep.
Um,
Just a
and
different flavor.
exactly, it's like you have to understand what makes sense to you. Um, and I was talking to a friend a while back, and he was like, if you actually applied for medical school right now, you have the perfect application. Like, I don't think I want to. Like, you get to that place where you're like, I know I can do it, but it's not for me. And I like, you find your calling, right? And
Absolutely.
that doesn't sit right with a lot of people. Let me tell you that, especially immigrant families. When you like suddenly get out of, you're like, I just don't want to do this anymore. Everyone's like, whoa, what happened? Like, what changed your mind?
And then you get
Uh,
your cousins talking to you. Oh, Donya, this medical school here, that one there, and yeah, that's
yeah.
it's incredible. I just wanted to bring it back to a point. So your comment on putting HIV in the satellite and putting in radiation, that's so fascinating because it's like I'm not sure on how the logistics or ethics go into HIV research in humans, but obviously radiation is something that's carcinogenic, and putting into satellite where there's no environmental impact and no impact personally, that's such a remarkable idea.
Honestly, it was just the fact that I think a lot of it came from the fact that I am not giving any like input here, and I really should because I'm part of this team. So I was just like, I'm just going to say something super crazy and hope it just makes sense.
Nice, nice.
And it did make sense at the end of it, because we were also working with non-infectious cell lines for HIV. So there was really like no real danger. Obviously, putting liquid among electronics is a big no-no. So that's why we were working on a custom-made microfluidic card, which you can get for quite expensive price outside, but we're kind of designing our own because funding was also an issue because we never got any funding ever.
Absolutely. And
Um,
sorry, before I let you, what is a tiny microfluidic card? What is that?
it's basically like if you think about it as like a tiny structure, like a very narrow structure where you can have like fluids in it for cell line kind of examination, a lot of other things too. But we were kind of looking at like the simplest form of it. And what we came up with was basically a structure where we use the surface capillary motion in order to keep the fluid in place while reading the information using sensors on top of it. And mind you, I had no idea what was going on. Like for the most of this, and I mean it when I said fake it till you make it, I was just sitting there trying to look very smart. So I was
Just
like, yeah,
nodding your head up and down,
yeah, I was like,
smile
yeah,
and wave.
this totally works. Yeah, we can like measure cell death and things like that. And then I would just go and I was like, did I actually say everything right? And I would double check my notes.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, you kind of have to do it, especially again, this is like a different topic. Being a woman in a non-technical field, when you're trying to make a name for yourself in a technical field, is extremely difficult. It's something that people just give up on it because it's so hard, and it shouldn't
Why do
be.
you think that is?
Well, I mean, I can tell you from my personal experience. I was told multiple times that I shouldn't have an opinion about what was going on because I was a woman who was not in engineering.
Really?
So, hey, this is not 1950s. We're talking 2019.
Wow.
So it's present and in Canada. I think to just think that that doesn't exist anymore, it's just a lie. It's totally out there.
So how'd that make you feel?
Oh, like, I mean, at the moment, like crap, but that also really motivated me to
Mm,
create something where I don't want to say no one else has to hear that anymore, because I can't stop that. And I hope that we're moving towards a direction where that would not be a thing anymore. But at least more women would be encouraged to join aerospace, to not be scared of, what they don't have to offer, but thinking that what they have to offer is actually what makes them be outside of the box. Because that's exactly what I was trying to make a point with that HIV payload in the beginning. I'm not an engineer. I don't see eye to eye with you on this matter, but what I have is not a weakness. The fact that I cannot see the limitations of the system allows me to come up with really outrageous ideas that would fit in the box. So
Creative.
that's kind of what I'm trying to convey when we teach kids, when we talk to them. It's like, don't ever think that your ideas are too crazy to be true. Worst case scenario, you put it out there, you hear a couple no's, either you forget about it or you improve on it. Really, that's just kind of what it is.
Either you forget about it or improve on it. Okay, I like that.
Yeah. I mean, most of the time people do, right? Let's be realistic. Not everyone just takes an idea and runs with it and is like, oh yeah, totally, yeah. At some point you hear so many no's, so be open to those. Be like, maybe I should change something in it. Some people give up on it. Some people try to make the change. That's totally fine. Most people that try to improve on it circle back to those ideas from the people that gave up on it. So, but that's also kind of what the persistence, not the insisting. That's kind of the point that I want to make. Insisting to me is saying, oh, what I have is good. Oh, what I have is great. What I have is great. Just not taking criticism. But persistence is taking criticism into account, being able to adapt and play the game right. Because
and what is this game we're talking about here?
we're talking specifically entrepreneurship, but the way you play the game right, you have the most fun. The way to think about it, right? It's at least how I think about it. You have to enjoy the journey. And I say you have to, because if you're not enjoying what you're doing it wrong, especially when it comes to entrepreneurship. I mean, think about it. You make some money as a young person, you have an idea, you put some of that money into your idea, or you are able to get some seed funding, good for you. At the end of the day, either this is going to take off and be the best thing that's ever happened to you, or it's not going to take off. And on the way, you made some awesome friends and connections who you can call anytime, have I don't know, a beer with even. So that's the worst case. And that worst case sounds pretty good to me.
Absolutely.
So it's really about that. It's the whole game, as people call it, all the motivational talks that we hear. It's all about having fun, just enjoying it. Live a little less in your head and a little bit more in your world. That's just kind of the message that goes with it. It didn't work out once, fine. It didn't work out twice, whatever. You want to go ahead with it. Don't let those things stop you. Are you having fun? It's a flow chart. Yes. If yes, go on.
Yeah.
If no, maybe give it a couple of shots, but decide.
Absolutely. And I think this reminded me of a message I was hearing earlier. It's like the person that enjoys walking is going to walk farther than the person that wants to walk 10 kilometers or whatever it is, that goal. Because if you enjoy the journey, like you're mentioning, you're able to go farther. And that's such an important piece. So I'm wondering, what are you doing personally to encourage this diversity, especially with the comments you're mentioning earlier with regards to the discrimination that women face in these fields?
To be honest, and it's gonna sound bad, but at some point, we're doing a lot of things that we can. We're encouraging women. We go to the events that are specifically geared for women in tech, women in aerospace, and it comes down to that. And the reason why I say it's gonna look bad, because it really comes down to those personal conversations that you have. Because you can go to these big events and you're having a big message, but it's intimidating all its own. There's so much pressure. There's just so many things there for you. So you're the one force saying, go apply to these fields, go, kick ass. And then there's 50 other voices that are like, don't do it. So how do you combat that, right? There has to be more of us. Like, one of me isn't enough for this, like 10 of me isn't enough for this. There has to be more people who basically just, they advocate for this. They have those one-to-one conversations, those LinkedIn messages that you get. I think a lot of people just disregard that when I have a student who's in just starting university, reaching out and telling me that they want to go to tech, they want to do aerospace, but they're not sure what. I don't just ignore that message. I actually talk to them. It's like, okay, tell me more. What do you want to do? Because it's so rare that we get that support. Like a lot of people just disregard it so easily. And I think just as a woman, it's so much easier for me to advocate for women in aerospace because, I've been there and all that. But I think a lot of my male colleagues are also doing the same thing. We have a lot of my male colleagues who, constantly talk to women and try to encourage them to join STEM. It probably doesn't have that personal touch as much, but, it really comes down to those one-on-one conversations. A lot of things that changed in my life didn't come from big conferences or motivational speakers or things like that. It was just one-on-one conversations, like, crying in a parking lot and the friend be like, get it together, Donya. It's like, yeah, okay, I got it.
The best of times, especially if it's a McDonald's parking lot.
Yeah. Pretty much. Very accurate. But that's just I can hope that people are more open on the personal side. On the policy side, I'm out there literally like talking all day about this. There should be more awards for women. There should be more scholarships geared for women in tech. There should be more recognition. Why is it that women who are CEOs of companies have less chance of getting seed funding when they're representing their company? That's in a lot of articles, and there's been a lot of talks about this. And why should I feel that me being a woman is a disadvantage when in its own is an advantage? Like, you're paving the way for a whole generation. So on the governmental and policy side, there has to be a force that pushes this forward on a systematic level, because there's so much we can do on the personal level, but it has to just build up to go to that high level, right?
It has to be from the top down and from the down up as well. So eventually we get to the middle at a quicker speed. So Donya, I just want to circle back here to your point on that first rocket mission not launching to turning into something better. So what happened with that, and what happened next?
So reality of the matter is that we didn't have funding. It happens, really. So I tell you that our students at SFU have done great job. They've brought together a whole satellite with like 10K, which usually you would need like at least 80, 90K for. And these were all based on competitions where different schools would build their satellite, they would take it to competition. One would win a free launch, which is about 200K, pretty expensive. So once you win that, yeah. Space is expensive.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah. So we unfortunately didn't really stand a chance to schools that actually had funding, like, good funding. So that mission got scrapped, and it was actually around the time that we went to Washington, and we literally, one of my teammates approached a booth to get a mission patch as like a merch from their booth, and we didn't find it. But then the person from the booth showed up and was like, oh, like, what are you looking for? My teammate was like, oh, I just wanted a mission patch. No big deal if you don't have it. And they were like, well, we don't have a mission patch, but if you have a satellite, we'll launch it for you at a discounted rate. I was like, well, I'll take that.
Yeah.
So we actually got super, like, at that point we didn't have a satellite because we had already scrapped the other satellite. We were just kind of in like a, limbo. And we decided to kind of, because we knew we were not going to get funding for one satellite on our own. So we approached UBC Orbit, which is the University of British Columbia satellite team. And we were like, hey guys, do you want to build a satellite together? We share all the costs 50-50. We got a discounted launch.
Nice.
Yeah. So we decided to have a 1U, which is a 10 by 10 by 10 centimeter cube, basically, that carries a payload to space. Quite, like, it's easier to make than a 3U or 2U. It takes less time. But now we had double the amount of workforce and double the funding that we would have. And our UBC friends just really pulled through. They brought their forces. We settled on 2 payloads this time. One payload for each university. One is a camera that is used for training amateur radio operators for disaster relief. And the other is a biomedical payload.
Hmm.
So another thing that came out of it was, me being on the team was like, we need to have a biomedical payload.
Put some science in there.
Yeah, gotta put some science in there. So it's a scale model of a human centrifuge. So human centrifuges are basically what are used to create artificial gravity. It's a proposed method for keeping astronauts healthy in space for long-term missions. We're still doing some research on it. There are a few short-arm human centrifuges in the world. There is one in France. There is one in Germany. And we have also a bigger one in NASA. But we decided that, hey, this thing has never been to space, because imagine putting a spinning module on board of something that's going in an orbit like the ISS. It throws everything off.
Right.
So, but for long-term missions, this probably wouldn't be an issue, but we still weren't sure. So we decided to see how this module would react on board of a spacecraft in space. So basically make everything mini. The satellite is a mini spacecraft, and this reaction wheel that we designed is going to be a mini human centrifuge. So we decided to put that on a satellite and use that information to build our own human centrifuge at SFU.
Wow.
So that's SFU Aerospace Physiology Lab, which is the lab that I work in, is designing currently a short arm human centrifuge with the information being obtained from this model. So with real-time information from the orbit, we're going to be able to modify our design on Earth for a future version of this human centrifuge.
That's incredible. And if I'm understanding correctly, if this goes out to plan, it'll essentially feel maybe not as much force as Earth, but at least a little bit more, so people wouldn't suffer from bone loss and things like that on the
So
aircraft.
yeah, you can have different levels of G. That's just like the way like we call it. But basically, what we're looking for is creating Earth-like conditions, so that this would be used as like an exercise in artificial gravity module, where all the fluids that shift up to your head in microgravity can be pulled down, so your cardiovascular system especially wouldn't suffer as much for long term. So again, this is there are different opinions on artificial gravity. I work on it, so I'm a big proponent of it. So a little
Slight bias.
biased.
Slight
Yeah.
bias.
But it is being heavily researched. It's being heavily researched for the past 10 years, I want to say, to see that, is this actually working? And so far, there's been really good results with it. It's just a matter of putting this module on a spacecraft, because, it's big, and it has to be manufactured perfectly for the spacecrafts going to the moon and Mars. So there's a bit of design and building that would have to go into it. This is just a first step for us to see how something like this would actually react on a spacecraft. Would it throw it off? What is the torque and all that?
Yeah, it sounds like quite the product. So what's going on in my mind, I'm thinking of like centripetal force, because the centrifuge is moving in a circular direction. So there's a force going into one area, and then you have to, I guess, combine that force with like the force and direction. I don't know. There's so much physics in this. You have some work that I do not want.
It's lucky for me, engineers take care of all that. I take care of
What's
the
those
human
engineers?
aspect. I show up and look smart.
Yeah. That's yeah. Man, that sounds like some serious physics. That's really cool though. That is something. I still like the HIV one, but this one's really interesting. Okay,
It's
so
different for sure. Yeah, it's going from the HIV one was very cellular level, and this one is very very human physiology level. Like you actually deal with people and you see what's happening, and it's just a whole different thing.
that's crazy. And this is probably not even remotely possible. But when you were saying this, I was thinking of like, what if we could apply this to like the moon and like Mars and all that, and have like real G-like conditions on those planets too?
Yeah, I mean
And
that's kind of the plan. Like if you actually
really,
put, well, I mean, okay, here's the thing.
nice.
The
We're
plan is
going to
that if
Mars.
we if we put this thing we're preparing for Mars missions. So the way we look at things now is we do bed rest studies, right?
Mhm.
Where we put people in bed rest confinement for 14 days all the way to 60 days to see what happens with their bodies. And head down bed rest kind of simulates space flight conditions. So see, but it doesn't really help us see much because all we can see for now is like 60 days of bed rest. But what's going to happen when you're in space for 3 years, which is
Hmm.
the trip that is being planned for Mars, is 3 years total. How is that? How is that going to affect someone's body? You can't really put people in bed rest for 2 years and see what happens to their bodies. It's just like not going to get the ethics for that.
No.
So we're with the research that we're doing, we're trying to predict things for lunar and Martian missions, and we acknowledge that the Martian missions come like a little bit later. But if we have a module like this that would actually work good for spacecraft and travel, why wouldn't we have it stationed on the bases? Because we're going to have a lunar base. We're potentially later on going to have a Martian base. Why don't we just have it there on the bases? It's like a regular going to the gym thing. So daily exercise regimen. So that's also part of what we do. We come up with exercise protocols for space agencies and things like that. So yeah, exercise physiology in space basically.
That's really cool. Man, a gym in space. That's something. That's one I'd want to try before I die. So so Donya, I just want to kind of take it back to the next step of this puzzle. So this is absolutely incredible. So is the HIV one. How does your business and venture Kaiden come into play from this?
um, yeah, so honestly, Kaiden was a lot of uh, pessimistic thinking coming from me. That was, hey, if I'm not gonna find a job in this field, I might as well create one. So jobs. Okay, let's start with the fact that I would go to conferences and people would ask me, "What do you do?" And I tell them, "Oh, I'm doing aerospace physiology," and everyone just look at me like I just said like the craziest thing ever, and they're like, "What is that?" And I'm like, "Okay, well, well, let's take it back a notch." But
I'm
people
Donya.
would yeah. People would call me a biologist. People would, like I'm like, I'm not a biologist. I mean, I love biologists, but I'm not. I don't. What I do is not biology. So people would just, and they were like, oh, so you're an astrobiologist. I'm like, that's the furthest thing from what I do. So people really didn't even know what my field was, and it's just getting more popular. It's super niche, and it's it's one of those things that people don't think about until we're very close to going to space, and they're like, so how are we going to keep them alive? And it's like, well, you should have thought about it about like 5 years ago.
Hmm.
um so that's again, like the work we do now will probably come into play like very close to Artemis missions, but I'm sure there's going to be great preparation for that. um so when you look, and I mean, I don't know if anyone's going to take a shot at this, but if you're going to look up aerospace physiologist jobs, there is nothing. There is
Nothing.
absolutely nothing. Now there is physiologist jobs, there is exercise physiologist jobs, but there is no space physiologist jobs. It's very much a thing where you just make a title for yourself based on the stuff that you've learned and your skill set. So I thought to myself, I was like, do I want to work as an exercise physiologist? It's a great field, but it's just not my thing. Do I want to work just as a physiologist in a lab? Again, great thing, but just not for me. It's like, I'm a space physiologist and it has a meaning. It means basically improving human health beyond our planet because we are on our way to become interplanetary. There is no stopping it. There is no turning point now. This is what we're doing and it's happening. So, and another point of it was that there is just not enough equipment and medical devices that would monitor human health in space. There is some technology. There is also technology that we use in Apollo days. Like, there is a thinking about it as like you should be monitoring people's health in space, but it's not very thorough. It usually relies on vital signs, maybe a couple more indicators of health, and that's really about it. It's not very a holistic measure. It's not a comprehensive measure, and such thing hasn't really been offered. So that's kind of where my company and everything came in. We started off with the idea of let's make cool things that would improve human health beyond Earth because we are leaving Earth. A lot of people will be. We're becoming interplanetary. We need a way to keep people healthy and functioning. And we're not just talking about bare minimum health that would get them to survive every day. Actual quality of life, it's going to be important on all levels. So we started off with that. We had a long period of time of brainstorming. So it was myself
I
and
could imagine. That's a pretty big, daunting task.
yeah, um, it was myself and 6 other engineers. Well, it was I guess 5 other engineers, and then like we had 2 scientists, myself and another scientist on board. And these are all the people that I had worked with before, from the design teams, from the aerospace days. You know, we worked alongside each other on all these different projects, and we decided to start a company together. And then, yeah, we spent a good chunk of time brainstorming, thinking about applications of devices. A lot of these applications would be military, you know, firefighters, deep sea divers, all that. But we really got the perfect idea around last summer. So that was where like the idea just kind of everything that we've been thinking about all kind of came together. We're like, holy shit, we have a device. I was like, guys, it's real. This is happening.
What was this device? You got me so intrigued. I can't wait anymore.
Okay. Well, I would have to get you to like sign like
An NDA.
forms
Okay.
order
Okay.
for me to talk about it. But basically, we came up with a comprehensive health monitoring device for extreme environments. Something that could be used by astronauts, something that could be used by people who are in deep, like they get their deep sea divers, or some people, you know, that work in extreme environments, just remote communities of Canada as well. So yeah, it just kind of like hit us, you know, we have an idea, this works, you know, we have a name, everything like makes sense. And yeah, about 3 months into that, there was an opportunity presented by the Canadian Space Agency and the Milo Institute, which is an institute for space science and studies in Arizona State University. That, hey, we're doing the first Canadian Space Agency lunar payload accelerator, submit your ideas, see if you'll get in, basically. I was at a conference in Dubai at that point. I was like, okay, guys, like, we're just going to fill it out. We're going to see what happens, right? We have our ideas. We're working on it actively regardless. And at that point, we're thinking, oh, we're on a 4-year timeline. So in 4 years, we're going to go full time. But until then, you know, we're going to just work on what we have. Mind you, we got in the accelerator. So
Crazy.
we're like, guys, we're no longer on a 4-year timeline. We're on a 6-month timeline.
Wow.
So it went from, you know, a bunch of us just being chill and working on our idea and enjoying life at the same time to work day and night, this like PDR, that document, getting everything ready. We started like collaborating with different companies. We brought on academic advisors and board members. We're trying to like subcontract other companies to come and consult with us. So it went basically from just like an idea to like a very real thing in a very short amount of time. And you know, at some point you're just like, you have to believe in yourself. This is the point where you're gonna bet on yourself. And I don't care what people say, because if you don't bet on yourself this time, they're not gonna bet on you. They're not gonna risk it for you if you're not risking it for yourself. I don't care what they say. I don't care how you look. I don't care how you feel you look out there. Just get out there, show people that if you're willing to put your hours and your time and all that into this, that they have a reason to do it too. So it all came down to that. It was just, you know, we're gonna bet on ourselves, because if we don't do it now, no one else will, and we're gonna regret if we don't. Like, we're gonna look back and be like, we should have done this. So it was a matter of either going super hardcore on everything in a short amount of time or giving up. And one thing we knew is that we were not going to give up. That was just not an option for us.
That's
So
incredible. It literally seems that like these small chances or small things that come up in your life, having that individual at clubs days just help you out with a flagpole just because you couldn't get it up with your self. They helped you. Hey, join, and then you're just making an offhand comment. Okay, maybe I'll help you out with this. Sounds kind of cool. You ignore them maybe for the first two emails, like most people do on clubs days. They're persistent. What are the odds of that? It seems like everything's kind of falling into place for you. And you were talking earlier about this kind of feeling like a right fit. Looking back now, do you think this was kind of like meant to be?
I really don't believe in meant to be's. I
What do
mean,
you believe in? What do you believe in?
here's the thing. There, it's in the little things. It's
Hmm.
about one thing that I really like to do when I go. I do a lot of talks. I'm an ambassador with the Canadian Space Agency, so I do a lot of talks to just young people and everything. Is that close your eyes for 10 seconds and imagine the thing that you want the most. Really feel it. Like if you can feel the texture of what you want the most, if you can feel the air coming in that moment, anything, really feel it. And to me, is that after that 10 seconds, if you open your eyes and you literally just felt like you had it, you have it. It's just about you setting the right kind of mindset to get it. Now, a lot of meant to be's, if I were to stick with meant to be's, I think I would have ended up in medical school. And I'm not saying, oh, being a doctor is a really bad thing. Being a doctor is a great thing. Like great people, you're set for a life and fantastic goal to help other people. But it's also a matter of recognizing what's for you and what's not, right? What do you really want? I had to be honest with myself and really not be scared of disappointing a lot of people when I said, I'm good at managing things and I'm good at really coming up with outside of the box ideas and somehow presenting it to people without fear. Those were the catches, right? It was like, what are you good at? What are you good at, and what is it that you want? For me, those things kind of lined up, and I had to be honest with myself. But the meant to, I don't know, I know a lot of people believe in the meant to be, maybe the timing, because it's how prepared you are. Are you in the right mindset to
Hmm.
get what you want? Because if I was in the mindset of I'm not going to take a risk when my company got into the accelerator, then I wouldn't have run with it, right? But there was a part of me that was like, this is it. We're running with it. We don't care like if we don't make it to the next stage. We don't care if we don't get the funding, but we're running with it. Uh, because the opportunity presents itself when it could present itself when you are in the right mindset or not. And
Yeah,
sometimes
absolutely.
you get very lucky that you're in the right mindset.
And I think what you're mentioning right now, it's like, yes, these things seem to have fallen into place, but perhaps it wasn't actually like this. But since you're, what's the word? You had an intention behind what you wanted. You felt like the textures of how you would do in this company. And so this reminds me of, have you ever heard of Psycho-Cybernetics, the book?
No.
Okay, so this was written by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. He was a plastic surgeon who essentially noted that some individuals, when they got plastic surgery, they would still say that they're objectively ugly, even though by his standards, he's made them objectively more beautiful. And he got into thinking, why is this? Essentially, skipping a lot of the information in that book, he found out it's the subconscious thinking and how our intentions play into it. And when you're mentioning, like, imagine yourself in that subject, imagine yourself like feeling the textures and stuff. That's one of the main points he's mentioning in the early phases of the books. And when you have that, everything else just becomes clear. Someone mentioning something, you pick it up more so rather than just throwing away as like, oh, it's a random conversation. And these little things become reality. So I found that really, I really liked your answer for that one. That was nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, well, I'm not aware of the book, but now that you mentioned it, I'm totally going to read it.
Such
But
a good
it's the
book.
fact that it's out there, that makes it real. And the more you believe it's real, the more you're going to work towards it. I don't believe that it's going to come to you without lifting a finger. No, I really
Absolutely.
don't. But the work that you have to lift the finger for to get there will present itself if you're in that mindset of catching it. It's just you being in the right place and right mindset of catching it. especially mentally speaking. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people call it fake it till you make it. I mean, there has been so many times where, like, even when I wasn't sure that a project was happening, and I would tell, like, to my peers and, like, my family, oh yeah, I'm totally going to the European Space Agency facilities for this project. Yeah, I'm totally doing it. And then, like, 2 months later, I would be like, yeah, Donya, you're going to this project. It's like,
Nice.
so, it's, I don't know if it's a fake it till you make it or all that, but that works. Like, saying, oh, of course, like, my company is helping people. Of course, like, I'm doing this. And it becomes part of you the more you believe in it. I think it's the part of believing that it is true, that what you want is valid, what you wish for is valid. So that makes you work extra hard for it if need be. It keeps you motivated. If you have to pull a few all-nighters, you will, so be it. Like, this is what you would be doing if you were a successful entrepreneur anyways. Like, you would be staying up, sending those emails, trying to network at all these events. So start acting like it. Like, start doing the things and take the opportunities, because there's, like, sometimes they're better than you think. Like, they end up being so much better than you think. And again, at the end of the day, worst case scenario, they don't end up well, you had fun. Like,
You had
whatever.
fun. You met
Yeah,
some cool people. You got some
you
new experiences.
exactly.
And I'm not sure if I can speak for you, Donya, but like even for myself, like I had experiences in various fields, entrepreneurship, marketing, list goes on. A lot of those were things that failed, sucked. I took so many things out of every single one of those experiences, and it's not only made me a more well-rounded person where these skill sets can add to diversity in other fields. I don't know if I had the diversity to add that HIV and that satellite thing. That I still love that. That's awesome. But you know what I mean? Like this makes you a more well-rounded person, more unique, and you have more to offer in any field you go into. So I'm really happy that you're mentioning this point right now. Um, yeah, I'm going to change topics in a little bit, but do you have any comments on that before I do?
Um, no, I think we're good. It's great to sit in a room. In any room you go, you have a story to tell. I find that amazing. Those are the people I gravitate towards too. For friendships, for anything. It's like, what story do you have? I don't care what your degree is. I don't care how many degrees you have. For all I know, you may not have one, and I don't really care. But, like, what is your story? And I find that it's a very good way to make friends and all that. So I agree with that for sure.
Absolutely. No, no, just cognizant on time here. I want to bring it back to Kaiden. So, did we cover all the pieces right now? So, right now, you're just getting the final pieces drawn out. You're getting those key partnerships, or was there something else that we didn't get to yet?
Um, Pretty much all that. We're currently working on our first prototype. We're looking into testing our first prototype in some habitats in a few months on Earth, just to see how this device would hold up in an environment similar to space. Um, we are working with a couple of companies on the collaboration aspect of things. Yeah, we're kind of like rolling with it for now. And getting so much good advice from the people in the accelerator, doing networking. It's been a really great learning opportunity. And despite things being so rushed at some points, it made us focus more, right? It was like, we're on a timeline, let's figure it out. Like, this is the time. So that's kind of where we are now.
That's awesome. I'm so excited to hear about the future of Kaiden and where you go. I mean, this is a story. You're saying you like stories. You must like yourself a lot then. Because this was something. I really enjoyed it. So I think that's a really nice place to close off. We talked about so many incredible things on how you went from being doctor to going against the parents' wishes and the family wishes. And as anyone who is an immigrant could perhaps relate to, those are very heavy pressures to dismantle your chains from, and to go your own way from doing something that you had a small interest in Iran in a small class to pursuing it again after a random encounter on clubs days through the intentions you set for yourself, and going forward to make your own business, make some game changing technology, It's quite a story. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Donya. So the way that we usually close off our show is we ask our guests for their one message to the audience. This could be on anything that we discussed today, or just anything that's on your mind, or really anything. And then we'll ask you for your shout outs. But what's your one message to the audience today?
I think it's going to be the same thing that I've said many times. Get out there and bet on yourself. I don't care if you're not into gambling, bet on yourself. That's the biggest investment you'll make. And I'm not just talking about self-improvement and self-growth and all that. Those are all equally important. But if you have an idea, don't talk yourself out of it. Don't be the negative voice in your own head. There are so many negative voices out there. They're going to tell you to not do something. Don't join them. Be that one positive voice in your head, if any, and do what you want to do. Apply for that job that you think is too big for you. Email that person that you think is super impressive and you're scared they're not going to respond to you. I've messaged astronauts on LinkedIn to get ideas for a company. You can't get worse than that.
Nice.
Get out there. Do what you want to do. Life's too short to wait for what you want to come around to you, because it will. If you have that idea in your head, at some point the timing will work and it'll come around. But what if it's too late then? Like, if you have the time right now, and if you really want something badly, to bet on yourself, do it, and others will follow. Others will bet on you, because if they see you're passionate about something, that you're putting all your time and passion into one thing, they have no choice but to follow. Like, we admire people for those qualities. So get out there and do it. That's the one message.
Just do it. I love it. And Donya, where can people contact you, connect with you, get in touch with Kaiden?
So my Instagram is quite active. I do some, space educational outreach on there. LinkedIn is probably the best place for anything Kaiden. We have a page for Kaiden on LinkedIn, and also my personal LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to talk to anyone if they want to join anything aerospace, STEM, really anything. I'm quite responsive on LinkedIn. If you just drop me a message, and I can totally chat with them.
That's fantastic. So with that said, Donya, this has been a remarkable episode. Really cool. I'm still like geeking out over that HIV and the satellite thing. That's awesome.
I should just send you like my slides for that presentation.
Yeah, I'm just gonna put it on that wall right there. That's really, I don't know. It's just so unique. I like it. I really do. But yeah, seriously, thank you for coming on. This was a really unique talk. I've never actually really gone into the field of aerospace, and this was a very cool introduction. You integrated a lot of unique concepts, from the discrimination that you faced while you were, going around with a Persian passport to countries, and how that related now that when you were a woman in the STEM field, specifically in aerospace, the changes you want to make in this sector, and bringing that diversity into aerospace in a field that didn't really have the ways of thinking that you brought it originally. I thought this was a really cool episode, and I'm really happy to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This is my first podcast, so this is a very good experience, and I'm really happy. If I could have conveyed a message out there, if I could have, or during this talk, if I could inspire one person to do what they want to do and they've been waiting on it, I think I've done my job. I'm good.
Absolutely. You already got me. So that's one person right there.
Great.
So perfect. Thank you again. And to the listeners and viewers of the Personal Process Podcast, thank you for joining us on another episode, and we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers. Hey everyone. I'm back after another amazing episode with another amazing guest. We hope we added value into your life so you could take the tips from this episode and fuel your process forward. If you enjoyed our episode today and think other friends or family members may also appreciate the lessons that our podcast brings, be sure to share us with them, subscribe, and rate our show so we know how we did. And always remember, trust the process.